What are you still doing in my life?
I never wanted to be in your life. I never wanted her in your life, neither.
Well, you should have spoken up. You'd have saved a lot of bloody heartbreak.
You're cruel. You're cruel and spiteful.
And you can't keep your hands to yourself.
I can feel it falling off me right now. I'm getting lighter by the minute.
He's a sex maniac, just like his mother.
You never knew my mother.
Nor did you.
Adultery you're citing, is it? With Yoko?
Mr. Lennon.
Do you want to know how many other women have adulterated since we got married?
No, I don't.
Too many to count, girl. We'd be here all day.
Shut up.
Shame on you. And your little whore.
Mr. Lennon.
Oh, for God's sake, call him John.
John.
That's better.
This is our last chance. Think of Julian.
Go on, then.
It's me or her. You must be able to see that. It's me and Julian. Or her.
Is that it?
What else is there to say?
You or her? Then it's her. Have it all. You've won the pools. There's a fantastic outtake in existence where I jump into the pool and enter the water and my wig stays on the surface. Now, I think John Lennon, had he directed this film, would have kept that shot. I think John Lennon would have loved this because there's about 17 different John Lennons running around the world. It's like performance art. We shot this film, we shot 90 minutes of film in 18 days, which anybody who knows, who works in the industry knows is crazy. I slept on the bottom.
Glass Onion. John Lennon.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 113 of Glass Onion on John Lennon. And we got with us today, backed by popular dementia, as the fictional John Lennon might say. That's from one of the biopics, not sure which one. I'm going to say Glass Onion's best friend, David Ghosty Wills. Hello again.
Oh, that's quite an honor to be considered that. I think of you as my...
A terrible person.
I was going to say my audio compadre. I don't know. I'll have to come up with something. I'm not Lennon, unfortunately, but neither is Lennon Naked. So we're in good company.
Yeah, we'll always have casual chemistry. That phrase.
That's true.
That phrase will be enough. We'll talk about your podcast at the end. So the biopic on the docket today, Lennon Naked from 2010. A couple of bits of business before we do that. When we did John and Yoko, A Love Story, which actually in terms of episodes was very, very recently, even though it was probably, 6 months, maybe a bit less, I kind of said that it might work as a companion piece with Birth of the Beatles. And I've subsequently done a two-parter on Birth of the Beatles, but I think at the time you said you liked Birth of the Beatles, so just talk about that for a bit. Is it so bad it's good, or do you think it's genuinely good?
I think it's genuinely other. I have sentimental attachments to Birth of the Beatles. I remember when it first aired on, I believe it was ABC here in the U.S., and I watched it with my mother. I had an awareness of who the Beatles were, but I wasn't quite picking up on the different personalities. And at the time, it seemed like more of what was happening in the zeitgeist rather than a biopic. In other words, it just seemed to fit in with Grease, Happy Days, the Buddy Holly story, and everything else that was going on around that time. And years later, it would have been probably that magic year of 1984 when it just seemed like everything on television had something to do with the Beatles. It was re-aired, and then I recorded it, and I liked it. You know, as a TV movie, you do have to lower your standards. Maybe you don't anymore. It's probably different now, but certainly at the time you had to think, okay, they didn't have much of a budget, but I remember it at least looking authentic, so it had that going for it. I have a fondness for it. I'll never forget the speech from Brian Epstein where he divides the Beatles into various body parts making up the whole.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that, actually.
Yeah. I liked it for what it was. And certainly that very early period of the Beatles, the pre-fame period, is my favorite period to see anything. I've been disappointed mostly by that, but that's my favorite period to read about and watch dramatized, etc. So I do have some fondness for it, but I don't recognize it as, something that's going to go in the time capsule for future generations.
Yeah, I mean, it has for me, it's the same in terms of sentimentality, because it's the first Beatles thing I ever saw. And I didn't become a fan straight away. It took about 6 months after that. I don't know if you heard the shows, but really my main takeaways, this is actually pertinent to the film we're talking about today. The fact that, as you will well know, John Lennon, the actor, was 33 or something like that.
Yeah.
But then I found out even Paul was 20, something like 28 or something like that. It's very much kind of the Musketeers, really. It's the four Beatles, or five at one point. Really, the four Musketeers plus Pete Best, including Stewart, obviously.
Right.
But John has this very strange voice. Like when he persuades Stu to join the band, he sort of says, "Welcome, fellow Beatle." It's this very weird, sort of beyond Stevie Ricks, It's
right.
But yeah, I quite liked it. Yeah, I had an affection for it. We had a bit of a rude awakening with John Yoko, a love story, didn't we? I think both of us had a similar experience. So maybe you shouldn't don't watch both of the Beatles. Just keep that nice memory,
No, but it's kind of the same with Lennon Naked when we move into that, because I did watch that during COVID, and it was only with the recent rewatch that I really started to pay attention to it. My opinion of it changed a little bit, not for the better, not to show my hand right away, but anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, let's start with general thoughts, but I also wanted to ask you, have you seen Christoper Eccleston, who obviously plays John Lennon, in anything else before or since?
I have not. I had no awareness of him at all.
Ah, right. The one I'd recommend probably that you probably like is called Shallow Grave, and it was Ewan McGregor as well. It's just pre-Trainspotting.
Okay.
And he's good in that. What I was really surprised about when I saw Lennon Naked, because I don't watch Doctor Who, we'll talk about that in a sec, but there's a Doctor Who connection, obviously. I couldn't believe how big he was, because I knew he was tall, but I always remembered him as tall and thin. But in this, I mean, not only he was, I think, 46, we can talk about that as well, but he's so just massive, and especially compared to Paul. Did you notice how tiny Paul was?
Well, I think that goes along with the overall flavor of this film. The fact that, I've never seen a movie where everyone around the main character is weak, ineffectual, and small. I think I said to you in a message that this is kind of like a macho fantasy of John Lennon. This is like He-Man John Lennon, right? Where he's walking into a room and putting everybody straight, leaving, and everybody just sort of looks at each other awkwardly, and that's the end of it. But yeah, compared to Paul, I mean, I guess we'll get into these characterizations.
We will.
Obviously, everybody else was much younger too, so he also had that going for him, or against him. He was so much older than everybody. Even George, they made George super agreeable. I mean, this is remarkable. This version of George, where I guess it's the antidote to John and Yoko, a love story, where he was a sociopath. Here he's just, I think it's great. No matter what they're doing, he thinks it's great. I mean, this is the George that Paul would have always wanted, right? Who just went along with everything. Even Yoko is sort of a simp in this. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. But yes, he's a massive guy. I feared for the lives of the other actors in every scene that he was going to put them through a wall or something.
Okay, we'll reframe what you just said as it's unique.
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, I didn't really know most of the people in this. Did I know Andrew Scott? I'm not even sure. I don't know when Fleabag was compared to this, but Eccleston I knew. I didn't really know anybody else. The writer was Robert Jones. I think there's a few good lines here. Director was Edmund Coulthard. Now, you're aware of the Doctor Who link here? Also with John Yoko, a love story.
Only afterwards, when I was looking into it, Doctor Who is something that It's something that I watched for a summer around 1981 and never watched ever again. I realize it's huge. I can go into a bookstore here in the U.S. and there is literally a Doctor Who section where all of the DVDs and Blu-rays and everything and books and toys and you name it. But it was never anything I followed. So if it's not Tom Baker, I have no idea who it is.
Well, that's so funny. We're basically the same. I mean, I remember Peter Davison as the one after Tom Baker. But yeah, Doctor Who has completely bypassed me, as has largely Star Trek, apart from the early ones. Next Generation, as has Lord of the Rings. What's the other one? Harry Potter. We've got this link here. So Eccleston was Doctor Who. Going back to John Yoko Love Story, Peter Capaldi was obviously Doctor Who. He played that amazing version of George.
Praying Mantis version.
Yeah, the Praying Mantis, yeah. Paul McGann was Doctor Who, and he's Mark McGann's brother. And then Naoko Mori, who plays Yoko. I've got a few things to say about that later. She was in a Doctor Who spin-off called Torchwood, which I haven't seen either. So the only other cast member I really knew was a guy called Rory Kinnear, who, when you look at him and someone tells you that's the son of Roy Kinnear, it just all makes sense, doesn't it? That doesn't happen too often, where the son of someone is a duplicate. In this case, it is. Boy, I mean, he's a little taller, maybe, but I thought, wow, that looks like Rory Kinnear. Oh, Rory Kinnear, I get it. Yeah, the hair's exactly the same, isn't it? Bald bits and the bits where he's got hair.
It's frightening almost.
Yeah, just in case people who don't know, Roy Kinnear was in Help and also How I Won the War as well. And it's very much was a British TV staple. This aired in 2010, just before Lennon YC, or Leno YC, don't even know how you say that, Leno NYC, there you go, which actually picks up chronologically where this ends, as does One to One. There's an IMDb review, which I think kind of hits the nail on the head. John Lennon comes over in this film as overbearing, callous, uncaring, rude, acerbic, immature, self-obsessed. In fact, it's hard to see any redeeming features in the character who stars here. It obviously is a negative portrayal, but as you were saying, and I agree with you, it's also positive in the way that he just comes across as this all-powerful. His verbal skills in this, obviously it's scripted, I think the fact he's got such better verbal skills than anyone else in the film kind of means he can take over any scene, as you were saying. But is this a negative portrayal of John Lennon? And how much of the John Lennon we see here probably was true? Yeah, just speculate there for a bit.
I want to make it clear that I dislike this film because I think it's an inept film and an utterly stupid concept. I don't think...
Look, stop holding back. I haven't got you on here to hold back your opinions.
I don't dislike it because it's a negative portrayal of John Lennon. I can take a negative portrayal of John Lennon. This is just a really stupid one. This does come across as positive in the sense that, yes, there is like a strain of Lennon fan that likes the idea of him bursting into a room and telling everybody off and leaving and having no charm whatsoever. Everybody is so weak. Everyone around him, the character of Derek Taylor is like an insult. I guess it's supposed to be Pete Shotton. It's the first, brunette Pete Shotton in history, with no curls, no nothing. The other Beatles, I don't know who gets off on something like this, where your character really has nobody to play off of. I just thought it was really bad.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that you wouldn't like it because it was a negative portrayal. I was just wondering how negative it is. Because I think the John Lennon, something that came to me when I was watching it, the John Lennon here is almost like Albert Goldman's John Lennon, in that if you look at everything that goes on in this film, he probably did do all those things. So, yeah, he ignored his son at various times. He was rude to people. He might have dismissed Pete Shotton as a shopkeeper or whatever. He was antagonizing people. But obviously the way that Goldman put his book together just took all the negatives and put them in that spin. I think that's what they're doing here. I think there's one bit that's fake when he throws the stone through the or throws a rock.
Well, there's
through
a couple.
The window.
I mean, the Magical Mystery Tour press conference and things like. There's a couple things that are.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like things that make him look bad.
What you're saying is true, that they are taking that Albert Goldman approach where we're going to take true events but only focus on negative things that are either documented or could have happened. But at the same time, it's glorifying this. I think we're supposed to understand why he's behaving the way he's behaving. It's one of those movies that did leave me flabbergasted of just how bad I thought it was. I mean, if I'm going to talk about positives, I felt like the recreation of Lennon's house, things like that, I felt like those, like the set decorator did a nice job, and I even think the wardrobe was good. But I just think this is like this weird fanboy fantasy of Lennon as the ultimate fork-tongued guy who's not taking any of your crap. And it's like Lennon the bully. And I guess there are people who are into that, but it just came across like not any John Lennon that I've ever read about or experienced or was a fan of. I mean, I would not be a fan of this guy. At the end of the movie where it's like, and he left England never to return, I'm like, good. Good riddance.
Oh, God. Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't pitch this lower than John Yoko, A Love Story.
Oh, I would.
The script, really?
Oh, yeah,
the script
absolutely.
Is slightly better. Oh,
no.
God.
I mean, let's put it this way. John and Yoko, A Love Story is goofy and hokey. This is just a bad film all around. This is not any kind of reality. I honestly really hated this movie. It's my. Right. I can't say it's the worst because I haven't seen Nowhere Boy or that Linda McCartney TV movie. I don't know what this is. I mean, if it were someone else, if it weren't John Lennon, maybe then I would, but because I know that a lot of this stuff is, I mean, that's not how I view Derek Taylor. It's not how I view McCartney. It's not how I view any of these people really in John's life. Maybe Cynthia was like that. I don't really know,
I know. Is it as inaccurate as Alan Klein in John Yoko, A Love Story, or he's just this nice guy giving us exposition?
Right. This is like this times 1,000. This is the pits. I'm sorry, Anthony.
That's all right. No, I'm gonna defend it now. I feel like we've agreed with each other for 6 years. So
okay.
No. I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it. One thing they do, which is done fairly clunkily. I'd agree with you there. The childhood flashbacks, and I mean, we have seen this. What was the one we did last time? The one with Bernard Hill that we both.
Oh yes, the Journey in the Life.
Journey in the Life. Yeah, they kind of did the childhood thing there. If you want terrible John Lennon biopics, probably the worst is In His Life, the John Lennon story, and they do that there as well. So this has become a trope or a cliche, hasn't it? The John Lennon flashbacks, having to choose between his parents.
Well, because all the movies go, hey, his issues all stem from this, his childhood, so they all play on that.
Yeah, I think Lewison has semi-debunked that story in Tune In. I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was something along those lines. I mean, obviously his parents had split up. But do you not think Christoper Eccleston's quite good at those emotional scenes? Do you not think he's...
In terms of the voice, I think he has a better Lennon voice than Mark McGann, who was up here like that, like that.
Yeah.
But I don't feel anything for this guy. I mean, that end scene, that "What about me? What about me?" I just sat there going, "Who gives a crap, about you?" I just thought, you've been a monster for the entire film. Why would I care? I'm not impressed with this "what about me" thing. I mean, I got my problems too, but that's no excuse to just be a complete ass.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously did go a bit over the top. And the timing is a bit strange. I don't know when this came out. Did this come out around his, 70th birthday? I can't even remember. Because it's not really much of a 70th birthday tribute, is it? You thought Goldman's John Lennon was bad. Yeah, they could have used that as a tagline,
yeah. Well, Eccleston, we did mention the age thing because he is noticeably older than John was. And it didn't really take me out of the movie, though. I got used to it pretty quickly. There are worse examples of that, like the Bobby Darin biopic with Kevin Spacey in it. I mean, the whole story of Bobby Darin is his whole arc is that he wasn't expected to live past 30 and he was trying to cram it all in before he died. He had a weak heart, etc. And then to have a guy who's, pushing 50 play him, it doesn't really sell that story. And I'm thinking of Jeffrey Rush in the Peter Sellers movie. He was obviously older than Sellers was for most of that film, but that kind of worked. It kind of works here. I'm not taken out of the movie by how much older Eccleston is. I got used to him, not as John Lennon, but just as like an unpleasant person.
Just an unpleasant scouser who's strangely familiar.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's not as noticeable as Birth of the Beatles, because in Birth of the Beatles he starts the film as 19, 33-year-old playing 19, whereas here it's 46-year-old playing 27, 28. There's two things I want to talk about at the beginning. Number one, they're obviously using a water motif, and I've always majorly bought into this, genuinely. This idea of water as sort of diving into a swimming pool as signifying freedom. And I love rain and all that kind of thing. So I know it's become a cliche at this point, but I quite enjoyed that. But let's talk about this scene where we're actually in 1964. I think they did make Eccleston look noticeably younger, even if it's just 2 or 3 years.
I'll find some positives. I've been very harsh on this movie. So I do think that the opening scene and the ribbing back and forth between John and Brian Epstein was played well. I kind of do think that was probably how their relationship, well, we know that it was maybe a little more gentle and loving than it's portrayed here. Kind of the whole world is more gentle and loving than as portrayed here. But that was okay. It's really when we get into 67 onwards that he just becomes a monster. But
okay, we'll stick with 64 then for most of the review. Yeah. No. So, okay, so he's going to meet Freddie. I'm not sure if it was in reality 64 or 65. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Fred Lennon made a single, didn't he? That was technically in competition with Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out.
That's true.
Christmas 65. I quite like it.
Story of My Life or something, right?
Yeah, That's My Life. Yeah,
yeah, that's my life.
I might put a clip in there, actually.
I'll pick up my story where I once left off. I sailed with the tides and lived on dreams. I've watched the sunrise over every ocean. That's my life, that's my love, and my home. It started in Liverpool, where I was born. No father to advise me, but I carried on. First time I saw the sea, I just knew this had to be. That's my life, that's my love, and my home.
I think Brian, apart from physically, he didn't really need a semi-balding Brian Epstein, but it's not the end of the world, is it?
No.
Yeah, but John is really goading him sexually quite a lot, to be honest. He's never been kissed by womankind. But the thing that I did think was quite funny was, if you think of this John Lennon, it's just a guy who just seems to have one-liners ready to go at any point. So the taxi driver says, "John, could I have an autograph for my wife, Vanessa?" And John just says, "The necessary precautions must be taken," which is not a great line, but I just love the idea of a guy just walking around, just tossing off one-liners, just every. And he probably was a bit like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they in real life they come across as much more humorous and charming. I always felt like everything was said with venom here, but
I think I disagree that he hasn't got any charm, because just very occasionally with Yoko he's got a bit of charm, and with the taxi driver they're obviously trying to show that John is, in touch with the common man, I suppose. I don't know. And then Freddie turns up, so we're going to sort of 67. Did you not like Freddie? If I had to guess, I'd probably say this was exactly what he was like.
Really? Oh, I would have thought.
I mean, just roughly, just.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of, from everything I've read of Fred Lennon, like he was a bit of a, because here again, I don't want to overuse weak and ineffectual, but I felt like he was this very sympathetic character who had no backbone at all. And I just felt like the Alfred Lennon that I've read about was maybe a little more showy, a little more of a con man.
Yeah, there's a bit of that, though, isn't there? Because he sort of turns up, he's a bit downtrodden, but then he's immediately, I don't know, he's drinking and singing songs. Well, not singing, but he does a little bit of singing. Like, I'm in show business. He does a bit of that. What would you have liked to have seen then?
I would have liked to have seen more spine on any of the characters other than the Lennon character, because I just felt like they were all, it could have been anybody, it could have, I just felt like everybody was portrayed so weak just to prop up the Lennon character that it was hard for me to be invested in any of the scenes because they just seemed kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I just thought the fact that he's not afraid to stand up to John, and there's little touches like he does make John laugh. I'm just saying that they've taken a couple of the points of Fred Lennon, because if you think of Fred Lennon, he's 5'1" or something, very short. And I'm not being prejudiced here. I'm just saying that maybe that gives you disadvantages in life. And he was in his 50s and was working as a dishwasher basically, but he still managed to pull a quite attractive 19-year-old and father a baby with her.
Well, when you're Lennon's father and all that. So, you're going to have that. And then he gets a record deal. And
a record deal.
Yeah.
Christmas single.
I mean, you know what I picture for Alfred Lennon? I mean, maybe I'm totally way off. Like if Sid James had been alive. That's kind of how I picture him.
Spoken like a true man.
Yeah, I think whenever Freddie and I'm really surprised you haven't seen Nowhere Boy. I think you will like it. You certainly will not feel about it the way you do about this one, I don't think, or John Yoko Love Story. I think it's definitely a step up. But obviously you get Julia in that film. I had one of the Quarrymen on, and he said that was a fairly accurate portrayal of Julia in Nowhere Boy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think when you get Freddie and Julia being portrayed by anyone, you're always looking for, are they showing you little bits that John Lennon would have taken for his personality, if you like? And yeah, perhaps they could have, with this one, they could have given him Fred a bit more gift of the gab, Well, I mean, even for this portrayal of John, like John had this zany humor streak, which we see all the time, and that was totally absent here. There's one-liners.
Yeah,
but
there were one-liners like he woke up out of the wrong side of the bed. It was just had all these one-liners. Some of them real, some of them, repurposed from interviews and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they repurpose a couple of bits from one press conference to another, yeah. But what do you think about, would you agree with me that when they come up with a line that you imagine John Lennon saying, that's quite effective? Like The Necessary Precautions. You can imagine he might come up with that. That sounds like something that might have been in one of his books.
Yeah, maybe. I felt that way in John and Yoko, A Love Story, where I don't feel like these lines are really worthy of John, but it's the sort of thing that he might have said. If you'd gotten someone less clever to write the script, and this is the best that they could come up with, that's kind of how I felt about it. It's like, okay, yeah, Lennon would have said something like this. It probably would have been much funnier in the moment, but I could see I think like every scriptwriter who writes for John gets excited. I get to write a lot of puns and do a lot of wordplay.
Just by the way, I don't know if you probably mentioned this to you before. Christoper Eccleston was on the audiobook of the John Lennon letters using this voice, and I put a little bit of it in the last couple of shows.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably the most success of the ones I've heard. It's the most successful, even more so than what's his name from Backbeat,
Ian Hart.
Right, Ian Hart, who does a pretty good John Lennon.
Yeah, I mean, he's really turned on the Scouse accent there, hasn't he? And it's quite, I suppose, quite a generic Scouse accent, but I don't know. It's kind of like he's heard Polythene Pam, right? Get a dose of air in jackboots and kilt. It's a bit like that.
Get a dose of air in jackboots and kilt. She's killadilla when she's at the hilt. She's the kind of a girl that makes an use of the whale. Yes, you could say she was attractively built. Yeah.
Right, so we're in 1967. As you mentioned earlier, this Magical Mystery Tour press conference obviously didn't happen, but again, I don't really have a problem with that. I think the point is that it's quite I found it quite entertaining. I don't know, it's pretty short.
Do you have a route planned?
We're going wherever the spirit takes us, you know.
As long as it's on the A303.
On a bus?
A magic bus.
What's magic about it?
Well, that's the mystery.
Who'll be going with you?
Basically anyone who can't read a map to save their lives.
Whose idea was it?
Mine.
Does that mean you're leading the band now, Paul?
In circles, maybe.
Can't replace Brian.
It was Paul's idea, but we all love it, don't we, fellas?
We've all contributed ideas.
I contributed sandwiches. Brown and white. Ham and tongue. Thick and thin.
And I'm wrapping them in greaseproof paper.
Could you imagine if they'd done a big press conference for Magical Mystery Tour and sort of explained it up front? The reception might have been different.
Well, I don't think they would have had anything to say, really, would they?
No, right?
They were saying in advance. What's it about then?
Well. Yeah, and they out Paul right there. I think they came out later, really, right, that it was Paul's baby for the most part.
Well, he had to go on the David Frost show.
Oh, yeah, and afterwards,
on YouTube. The day after, wasn't it?
Right.
27th. Again, if you think of the lines as deliberately corny, then, are you leading the band now? Yeah, in circles. And we've all contributed ideas. I've contributed sandwiches. If you just take it as read that it's going to be corny, then I don't think it's as bad. It's weird to think of a December 67 press conference with the Beatles. That would be weird, wouldn't it? Because I don't think...
would they be asking, is Paul leading the band?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's like needless foreshadowing. But, I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do, which is we have to show the spirit of the Beatles and how they would have these funny press conferences, even though this one didn't happen. It's the only time that any of the other Beatles seem to come alive in this movie. I mean, the one thing I will say is that the portrayal of Paul is terrible in this, but one thing that they get right is that I think when John would say something cutting or kind of anything remotely humorous, Paul would sort of chuckle to himself or find it funny rather than take offense. I think that was played well, but for the most part, this was like, I don't know what version of Paul this was. They even give Paul Alan Klein's line about, let's not say anything about the breakup or whatever, and I'm pretty sure that was Alan Klein's directive towards the band because he was renegotiating their deal with Capitol in the U.S. and didn't want anything to be screwed up. Yeah. So to give that line to Paul, it's like, what a slap in the face. The guy that Paul hates, and they're having Paul say his dialogue.
Yeah, I think the late Beatles scenes are comparable to John Yoko: A Love Story. That they
do avoid a lot of fake beards, though. I didn't see too much that was terrible. I mean, the John and Yoko: A Love Story, the fake beards were so cheap looking and so phony, and they almost highlighted it in that movie. This, I think they're a little more tasteful.
Okay. And just the way they have to simplify things, or they have to move the story along. So you get the argument about the White Album, which was in John Yoko: Love Story as well. Now let's talk about Cynthia and Julian. I think there is some genuine sadness. I mean, okay, it's maybe quite shallow, but we obviously see Julian at various times kicking a football and his dad kicks it away. I thought that was, I mean, I agree with you, that was well over the top. Julian wants to play football with his dad, and his dad just angrily kicks the ball away. It's like, really? That sounds like a bit of a Goldman thing, doesn't it? By the way, one thing we've also talked about is in biopics, they tend to pick one look and stick with it. Yeah. You kind of get the 68. You get the 68 look, really, isn't it?
You know, it was funny, though. I have to just to go back to the John characters. Every time he looked at Julian, I swear to God, he was looking at Julian as if to say, how did this child get here? As if he wasn't even responsible for him,
Yeah. I think a lot of these rock stars, they're good at making babies, but not so enthusiastic once the baby's actually here. Yeah, I thought that was a bit over the top. It is weird. I mean, I don't know whether there was much pushback, because I think I was actually abroad when this came out, and then I managed to watch it 6 months later or something like that, but I don't know if the Lennon estate would have anything to say about this.
No, but there is actual Beatles recordings in this. Or Lennon solo, isn't there?
Of course there is. And there's real footage as well, isn't there, at the beginning?
Yes, so it's like some clearances had to have taken place. Somebody had a good lawyer.
Yeah. It's quite strange, the timing as well, as I was saying earlier. Don't know if this was supposed to tie in, because obviously Lennon YC is pretty favourable. It's so mainstream, you know.
Yeah, right.
By the way, I keep plugging this film one-to-one. This has actually got phone calls with the real Alan Klein, which are quite interesting, where he's not really massively combative. John's trying to persuade him. He sounds quite reasonable, but it was nice to hear his voice at some point. So we get all the Magical Mystery Tour, all the India stuff. Cynthia again, I mean, this is just such a bad portrayal. Just the line, not the actress, but the line she's given.
Yeah.
I think in John and Yoko Love Story she was like this. That Spanish film, you know, Living is Easy with Eyes Closed. You heard of that? In that one, they've got a private apartment and someone's trying to get in. Maybe it's the main character, and she chucks a plant pot at someone, or plant in a pot.
They gave her a little agency in that movie, but she has.
Yeah, I mean, she's just
nothing
like we were saying in John Yoko Love Story. Her and May Pang were just totally useless, you know.
Right.
And here she's just. I can't remember what it was, but he's obviously just being terrible to her, and I don't think that's the reality of their relationship. Maybe at the very end. And she's just, I don't know, she's just nagging him or whatever she's doing, which isn't really much.
No, but I did like her mother, the portrayal of Cynthia's mother.
Oh,
when
yeah,
the
Lil,
divorce
yeah.
came. Right. And there's like a little dig where I think it's John is supposed to be reading postcards and there's something nasty. And he said, well, there's something from Lil.
Oh, yeah.
I
says, he's a sex maniac or something like that.
I think that was genuinely funny. I will give the movie I'm warming to it as I'm talking to you.
Oh, please, yeah.
It did have a couple of funny moments, but I do think it's genuinely a bad film. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. I've just got a few notes on the various scenes here. One of the things that I did notice, if you didn't know much about the Beatles beyond what everyone knows, I think it would be a bit confusing. It's like, who are all these people? And also they have constant references back to Brian, which in reality would be quite poignant, but we only saw him for one scene. And we didn't really get any sense, apart from just jokey banter, that he was important to them. So that was missing for sure. Right, so we have to talk about Yoko. Let me give you my opinion first. Her accent seemed to be a bit more closer to her normal one. You know, in John Yoko Love Story, she had this really annoying American accent. We obviously get all the stuff about I'm a cloud in the sky and all that. And what's the thing she says? Hang on, let me find this. It's when she comes round for the famous first night. Oh, yeah, that's it. I've just been thinking about acorns.
Maybe this is why the Lennon estate liked this movie, because she's so weak in this movie. It's almost as if, you know, they don't really have their meeting of the minds. It looks as if Lennon is peeping, right? She's doing this, the clothing being scissored off routine. And I think it's in like a window, right? So he's staring at it from the street. And then it's almost as if he's like, get me that girl.
Well, he does. He sort of dispatches. Yeah,
right.
He sort of dispatches Pete Shotton to he uses the word fetch, doesn't he? Which is just terrible. I don't know if it's like in America, but in England, like fetch is only for dogs, really.
Yeah.
Fetch Pete, fetch Yoko, you know.
And he brings her over, and she doesn't have much to say.
Yeah, there was no chemistry. I think we still don't know, do we, whether Mark McGann and Kim Mayori were a couple. I still haven't actually found that out.
And what was the name of this actress in this movie?
Hang on a sec. Naoko Mori.
Well, maybe she and Kim can go on the road and do a lecture series playing Yoko. Has anyone else played Yoko in a film? I think it's only those two.
No, probably not, actually. Don't think so. But yeah, I just felt here she's just... If you remember in the other one, do you remember they planted the acorns at Coventry Cathedral? And Kim Biori did that brilliant speech about art, Call Henry Moore. Ask him what is art. I thought she had a bit more, I was going to say balls, but chutzpah in that one. In this one, everything is like, I'm thinking about acorns. Yeah, you don't get much, you don't get the strength of Yoko, which was obviously there.
Right.
So yeah, I'd agree with you there. There's just no chemistry. I think John Yoko Love Story, they had genuine chemistry. Right. I'm almost afraid to go on with this, to be honest, but let's plow on. Okay, so the next thing I think in the film, or the next thing I want to talk about, is obviously the Brigitte Bardot episode. So, as with everything, there's stuff we know and there's stuff that's a bit murky. So, the very short story is that somehow or another he got an invite to meet her, and obviously there was one quite funny line where Derek Taylor, who I agree with you is sort of a crap character in this, says, you seem more nervous here than you were about meeting the Queen. And John says, well, I never spent 3 years wanking off to a picture of the Queen in a bikini, which it's quite funny. So the shorthand is that John's nervous and for some bizarre reason thinks that doing acid is a way to combat nervousness. Never quite understood that. In a Goldman book, Brigitte and her entourage go out and they come back and John and Derek are laid out with empty beer bottles, which is another weird thing. When you do acid, you don't want to get drunk at the same time. But anyway,
exactly.
Do you share a birthday with Bardot to the exact day? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Although not the same year, obviously.
Not the same year, no. Because she's 90?
91.
91, okay.
Yeah.
So, from what you know, what about the truth of the real story of Lennon and Bardot? Go on.
I mean, that kind of is it. It's just funny, in the movie they do like a big build-up and they have this little special effect with her face in the corner of the screen and stuff. It's kind of played for laughs, and then I thought we were going to get someone playing Bardot. Like we were actually going to see this, and then they don't show it. We just see after the fact. But Brigitte Bardot has written a couple of memoirs, and in one of them she talks about it. She doesn't go at length talking about it, but it's true that basically Lennon and Derek Taylor dropped acid, and then he didn't do anything. Like he just sort of sat there and stared at her. It was like meeting Elvis.
Oh, yeah.
He was just sort of overwhelmed and just didn't say anything. And I think it was at their hotel. Brigitte was staying at a hotel. And yes, her and her entourage went out to eat. John was invited. He had nothing to say. He stayed there, and they were shocked to come back to the hotel room, and they were still there. Nothing about beer bottles, but the general impression was that she thought he was like an idiot, basically. And they were asked to leave, at which point they did. I guess what he needed was Brigitte to stand up and say, well, if you're just going to stand there and stare at me, I'm going to, to do the Elvis treatment.
With Elvis,
Right.
Go to bed with Elvis.
Right. Yeah. And the funny thing is like she had a reputation at that point of hooking up with musicians. She was with this guy, Sacha Distel, and of course, Serge Gainsbourg. And so it wouldn't have been outside the realm of possibility that maybe something could have happened there, if John had been charismatic, but he made the wrong move by dropping acid right before meeting her.
Yeah, he had it on a plate and then dropped it. Well, when you said about hooking up with musicians, I thought you were going to mention Jimi Hendrix, because that seems to be a semi-confirmed rumour.
Well, that I've never heard.
Haven't you? Oh, right. There's a couple of stories that have got slightly conflated. So the main story is that they met in 1968, I think, as well. I don't know if it was pre or post the John meeting, at a French airport, maybe Paris. I don't know if they went to like an airport hotel or whatever, but they had a sort of 2-day hookup, apparently. But it's got conflated with a very weird story where Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd in 1967, so a year before he took over from Syd Barrett, somehow got a gig, not literally a gig, but got a job showing Jimi Hendrix around Paris. I don't know if you heard that one either, but
no.
I think the Bardot-Hendrix one, I mean, it's in Philip Norman's book, so, whatever your opinion of Philip Norman is, but that seems to be, as I said, semi-confirmed. Yeah,
well, I've read a lot of books and biographies of Brigitte, and that's not in any of them.
Oh, okay.
So
who knows? Who knows? We'll put that in the maybe pile.
That might be in the maybe pile. Yeah. That's in the Norman pile.
Yeah. But the line here, which, again, is coming from Goldman, it's slightly changed in this film, Lennon Naked. I was on acid, she was on the wane. I mean, from looking at pictures of Brigitte in the late 60s, she doesn't look like she's on the wane to me. But where is she in her career? Obviously, her heyday, I guess, was the 50s.
Yeah, 50s,
where
early
is
60s.
Where is she in 68, culturally, career-wise?
She's still making movies, but she's becoming more known for her jet-setting parties and boyfriends and that sort of thing. And then it's only a few years later that she would retire and then dedicate her life to rescuing animals and animal welfare, etc.
Yeah, because among those sort of goddesses of a similar period, so you've got Raquel Welch, Sophia Loren, Marilyn Monroe. I think Brigitte is... I just don't think you could ever get someone as naturally gorgeous as that. You know, because Marilyn Monroe was kind of a creation. If you look at pictures of Norma Jean, she was attractive, but Marilyn, I would argue, is a creation. I mean, Brigitte as a young woman, I mean, my God. You know?
Yeah, it's pretty
this is perfection. Because she's got that... Yeah, I've done a lot of study into... psychological study into her...
I'm sure you have.
No. Yeah, it does nothing to do with the picture on the ceiling. No, it's none of that. No, into attractiveness, and because she's got that little girl look about her, you know, she's got that doe-eyed, or she had that doe-eyed,
and the pout and all that.
Yeah, right? The pout. Yeah, she had something in common with Monroe, actually, a sort of sexiness and a perceived kind of innocence. I don't know, maybe that's wrong with Bardot. But.
I think also a little spice to the mix with Brigitte Bardot is that she's kind of crazy, and I mean that in a good way, like temper tantrums and lovers being left at the airport, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, of course, Marilyn Monroe had a history of mental illness, didn't she, in her family?
Yes.
Without getting into trouble, let's generalise about both sexes. I think both sexes like a bit of craziness in the other, you know?
Yeah.
In the partner. I think that might be I'm being diplomatic here. Okay, so in the film, I think the day after... I mean, it's quite funny just seeing John Lennon. It's just for me, because he is the eternal adolescent, as a lot of rock stars, having to sort of scale over his wall, you know, hungover or possibly still on acid. And he jumps into the pool. And the one bit I like, I mean, it's very on the nose, this idea of water as freedom. I think it started with that, the whole film. The idea of just jumping in a pool. It's almost like you can just wash away all your problems, you know?
I sort of took the water thing to having something to do with his father being at sea. I mean, it's kind of a heavy-handed symbolism, but I was thinking that was probably what it was about. But yeah, the bit with Cynthia, she's just, there really isn't a biopic that does Cynthia justice.
Did I mention Birth of the Beatles? She's really quite sweet in that one. That's probably her best portrayal, honestly. It's not really helped that she's 20 and obviously, as we already said, the John Lennon guy was 33. So it comes across slightly...
well, and he's more like an uncle here, right? How old is Eccleston here?
I think he was 46. Maybe he was 46 when it came out.
And Cynthia looks like she's in her early 20s, maybe.
Yeah.
He meets Yoko, but I just feel as if... It's like everything in this movie. Everyone in this movie is so passive, is so weak compared to the John character. It's almost like, you know, the expression NPCs, non-playable characters. So in a video game, you're like the main character walking around in Grand Theft Auto or something, and you're making things happen, but there are these non-playable characters that you can interact with. They don't really do anything. I mean, they have a couple of lines here and there. They might walk into walls, but you can sort of beat them up and, do what you want with them. And that's kind of how I feel this movie is. John Lennon walking around with a bunch of NPCs. I mean, I guess the exception would be Brian, briefly, in the movie.
So brief, though, isn't it? It's too brief.
And then he's gone. And I suppose Derek Taylor, to some degree, but certainly all of the women are, there's only a couple of them, but they're all these very, very passive characters that are just, you're not meant to even give them much thought.
Yeah, I think in John Yoko Love Story that applied to Cynthia and May, but obviously Yoko was stronger, yeah. Yeah, I won't go through all the Pete Shotton stuff, but Pete Shotton's book, by the way, is a fabulously entertaining read. Came out in the early 80s, yeah, it's brilliant.
It's my favorite Beatle book.
Oh, is it? Yeah, no, I love it as well, yeah. Don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the use of the word fetch, I think I've already talked about this, because in England you think about that with a dog. You use that with a dog rather than a person. Right. But I think there was a thing, I think it's in Pete Shotton's book, you probably know better than me, where I think John did ask him to find him a house, and he was like, well, who the fuck are you talking to? Did he start treating him like a slave in real life? Was that in that book?
Yeah, I think he says, I mean, it's not quite as harsh in the Pete Shotton book, but I think, it's been so many years since I've read that, but I think he does say something like that. I think Pete starts to feel that himself when John buys him the supermarket and, that he's almost a kept man.
Yeah, I mean, the line here, I don't think he said this in real life, "You're a shopkeeper." It's just so...
Yeah.
One thing you have opened my eyes to is the fact is how passive everyone else is. I hadn't really thought about that. And the fact that Christoper Eccleston is so big, like physically massive, and the Scouse accent is so aggressive. I think that's obviously the brief they had, I suppose. You know, everybody else is just almost like filler for John. I did want to talk to you about the real John in May 68, because his behaviour in this month is just incredible. And again, when I reread Coleman last year, I actually really enjoyed it. I've never said it's not an entertaining book, but I mean, there's none of this in that, whereas obviously our friend Goldman goes the other way. Are you aware that through Chip Madinger, we now know that John and Yoko almost certainly got together on something like the 3rd or 4th of May rather than the 19th? And the way that changes things is that when they go to New York, John and Paul, and they're kind of... John's in a very strange mood. He's playful with Larry Kane and then really testy with everyone else.
Right.
Yeah, they'd got together. But the funny thing is, I said when I did a 1968 show, he was essentially unfaithful, in quote unquote, to Yoko straight after they'd got together. And he said, I'll go on and live in her in a fucking tent or whatever. He had a night back with Cynthia. But then when he went to New York, do you know the story that Nat Weiss said about the maid? Do you know about that?
I think you might have told me that story.
Yeah, I think I either told you or it was on the show anyway. That basically they got an apartment. Nat Weiss said, "You can stay in my apartment." John said, can you get us some good-looking maids? And basically John and Paul were competing for this maid, apparently. But Paul was Paul had a half an eye on Linda Eastman. I mean, we know that how horny Paul was in 68.
Right.
I mean, he was an absolute player. And John was probably just... My kind of cod psychology reading is that he probably does know that he's going to be with Yoko possibly forever. And, he wants a bit of a last hurrah. It's probably one of those. What about the Jesus Christ thing? Is there anything we can say about that? When he thought he was Jesus?
Again, I think it's one of those details that, like the writer's going, I got to squeeze that in somehow. And it's sort of shoehorned in. Just sounds stupid when he says it here. I mean, the reality from what I remember is that he says it during an Apple board meeting, right? Or at least he says it with the other Beatles.
He gets the idea and then he calls a meeting to tell them. Yeah.
Right. And in this, he's just sort of saying it matter-of-factly. And again, it's just, in this reading of Lennon, it's hard for me to get a beat on this character or really have any sympathy for him or any kind of understanding of what he's doing or saying in this. I just feel like maybe it's all cribbed from Goldman's book. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. This is kind of like a less nuanced Goldman.
I think we might have even said that earlier. Yeah, I think we did.
This is sort of like the Goldman book. People will not believe this. I think the Goldman book is more fair to John than this book is. I mean, this film is.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes. So just to say, that I think of all the crazy months in John Lennon's life, May 68 could be the maddest. With all Bardot, think he's Jesus. That New York trip is just so weird to me. I think they were definitely both on something fairly strong, John and Paul, on that trip. Paul's a bit more level-headed maybe, but John has just got such a strange mood in that trip. It's very weird. Yeah, and then we get this meeting where John's obviously going to get a divorce from Cynthia. We get the meeting. And in real life, this is one of the 2 times, if you don't mind, I won't get into this now because it would be a big tangent, the times when John looked slightly hypnotised, in inverted commas. And I don't mean literally Yoko hypnotised him, with a watch or something. But it seems strange that Cynthia said she looked at him and his face was just completely blank. And he just didn't look like the John I knew. And then May Pang in 75 said almost the same thing when he came back from the dentist. But anyway, we get just this horrible John Lennon just being terrible in this film, just saying, adultery, is it? Do you want to know how many women I've adulterated? And in the Goldman book, he does it on the way back from India. He gets drunk on the flight back, and I'm not sure about the evidence for this, and just basically goes through every single woman not every single, but goes through all these women that he'd fucked during there. Right. And then he starts talking about Cynthia's friends as well. So I could, as you're right, I can see the connection. Yeah, definitely. we get a scene which is very similar, in fact, to John Yoko, A Love Story, which I think is about Revolution 9.
Oh, yeah.
There's one
that was all right, actually.
Was it? Oh, something positive. Go on,
something positive, yeah.
Shoot.
I thought that was okay. You know what? Because it was the one time in this entire movie where I'm reminded, oh, yeah, he makes music. Or he does something creative, because the rest of the time there's nothing to do with anything. But, yeah.
Yeah. There's just one funny line where I think it's George. Is it George Martin says, "Oh, there aren't any number ones on this record," and John says, "Are you saying there's a load of number twos then?" Which I think is a toilet reference, obviously, which is quite funny. There's a few good lines here. Then we get all the Two Virgins stuff. I don't think we need to go over that. And they're kind of equating themselves with Adam and Eve and all that kind of thing. Let's go on to. So you talk about Gloria Emerson, and I'll tell you one of my observations. Go for it.
Well, it's funny because here's a movie that's a negative portrayal of John Lennon for the most part. I don't even know if that's really the filmmaker's intent. I'd love to read an interview. There's a part of me that thinks that they actually believe this is what people want. Like, this is the Lennon people want. Let me just back up for a second. When I used to go to, Beatles conventions, did you ever go to a Beatles convention?
I've been to one in Liverpool, about 4 times, yeah.
So the ones that are in the New York, New Jersey area, there are always these guys who are wearing tie-dye shirts and long gray-haired ponytails and flip-flops. And, they might have, on their tie-dye, it'll be a tie-dye John Lennon. Or it'll be the other guy who's wearing an army jacket with a lot of pins and also psychedelic Lennon-esque glasses. And these guys will always lecture everyone around them about, listen, man, Lennon took no guff. You understand? He laid it on the line. You sound like that
Fabcast podcast.
That's what
I used to love that. I know you didn't like that, but I used to love that show.
Well, that's what it reminded me of. And those guys, Lennon's my hero, man. And I was like, oh my God, get me out of here. And I kind of feel like this movie is kind of a bumbling way toward that kind of thinking. It's a negative portrayal, but it's also a gift to those guys that hang out at the Beatles convention. Lennon, man, he could have torn down the Washington Monument, man. We could all... Anyway, so I think we were talking about Gloria Emerson. So if this is an attempt to tear down Lennon, it's certainly not an attempt to humanize him, because they don't really do that in this movie at all. But if this is an attempt to tear down Lennon, the Gloria Emerson exchange, which is put in a different context here, would have been the opportunity to do it. Because when I saw Imagine John Lennon in 1988, I was on Lennon's side of that argument where they show the scene with him and Gloria Emerson. Years later, I do research, and I find out that Gloria Emerson was more serious about ending the war in Vietnam than John and Yoko were. And she put her money where her mouth is. She went to Vietnam. So now I'm seeing it from her perspective. And yes, she's putting in serious work, and she's interviewing generals and all sorts of stuff. And she's really, she's really committed to it. And she probably, in her mind, saw John and Yoko's activities as being frivolous. She says, the most important thing she says, are you promoting peace or are you promoting John Lennon? And I think John Lennon gets upset in that clip, because I think that hits home, because there's a little bit of both going on there. He's promoting peace, but it's also a product. And then the product is he and Yoko. I mean, I think we've said this before, they're kind of trailblazers in that they invented YouTube influencers before that even existed, everything they do has to be filmed and documented, and, they're just being together and being alive together, their relationship is the product, So years later, I learned about Gloria Emerson, and I go, oh, okay, now I'm seeing it from a different angle. In this movie, we get that exchange, but now it's turned into a press conference. It reminds me of the movie about Freddie Mercury, Bohemian Rhapsody, where you have and maybe biopics in general, where you have these real events that are recast in some other way usually changing the timeline. You know, it's like, this is too good of an exchange to not have in this movie, so let's just move it ahead 3 years. But here, it's a press conference, and Gloria Emerson, or a character who's reading her dialogue, is questioning Lennon, and Lennon puts her in her place. And I thought, wow, well, here, if you're going with the negative portrayal of Lennon, why not have Gloria Emerson show him up? Why are we just doing this all over again? But I think the problem with Gloria Emerson, if there's a problem, is that she sounds like Miss Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies. So everything she says is sort of like this, oh dear boy. You know, she uses all this kind of, she has that sort of upper class lilt to her voice that it's hard to take her seriously, even though what she's saying is actually very, very serious. She was not delusional or anything.
Yeah, a couple of things to say. I had almost the same experience as you when I watched Imagine, and I think it's because we were young.
Right.
And obviously we were Lennon fans, and I tended to take his side all the time, and she seemed old to me, and I did note that voice, even though it doesn't seem to be in American accents. A posh voice is so obvious. I mean, in England, it's like if someone says, hello, Mr. Lennon, tell me about your new book. It's so obvious that they're posh. It doesn't seem so clear, but I got that. But there's a bit, and again, I didn't realise, I'm exactly the same as you, I didn't realise how involved she was. Isn't there a bit where Yoko says, I'm going to do the voice, sorry, Lennon Estate, if you're listening, maybe if we smile, maybe we can stop the war.
Make it jolly.
I will make it jolly.
Yes, you know, we have to make it jolly.
We can't all afford to be neurotic.
Jolly, maybe we might stop the war.
By being jolly?
Yes, because the thing is, when you're happy and when you're smiling, you don't want to kill somebody, do you? You know, it's when you're very serious you start to think about violence and death and killing. I mean, have you ever seen a person killing somebody with a smile on his face and being happy? No. Killers are unhappy people. And they're violent because they're so unhappy and so damn serious.
Mrs. Lennon, we're boring each other, so I'll go away.
To you about that? I mean...
Thank you. Goodbye.
And let me make it clear, and I've made it clear, you know, I've been nearly 7 years with this podcast. I like concepts. I like ideas. I'm happy that John Yoko's ideas were out there, especially from now, because you don't have to take them as seriously because it's 50 or 60 years later. You can watch a YouTube clip and say, oh, John Lennon says everything is art. I can kind of understand that. You know, maybe not literally, but people can create their own art. You don't have to be Michelangelo to create art. I get all that. But yeah, that bit... It does get a bit ridiculous, but I honestly think in my heart that they were quite sincere. But I think Dan Richter told me that John Lennon always had a joint on the go, and that doesn't make him a sort of a terrible drug addict. You know, you know my views on marijuana,
right,
good and bad, but it does make your mind think in a bit more of a lofty way without perhaps thinking it through completely. So I'd probably say that.
Well, you know, I'd like to know how that meeting with Gloria Emerson came about in the first place. I mean, obviously it was done for the cameras, and the cameras were organized by John and Yoko. So this was their project. So what led to this meeting? I'm assuming that they orchestrated it. Did Gloria Emerson say something in a column about them that they decided they wanted to meet her? I don't know how it happened. It's just not an accident that those cameras are there. That's part of a John and Yoko project, right?
Yeah.
So how did that meeting come about? Because there's part of that story that we're not getting. I mean, I think the reality is John and Yoko's, if everybody smiled, or, you know, just promoting, just putting the word peace out, sort of like what Ringo does now.
Exactly. I was going to say that, yeah.
That can coexist with Gloria Emerson getting in a helicopter over Vietnam and interviewing soldiers on the front lines. I mean, that can coexist with that.
Yes.
So how did this confrontation get started? That's what I'd like to know. You know, they have the upper hand in the sense that it's their cameras and their project, but how did that happen?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that. All I know is that I think it was originally broadcast in a quite amazing half-an-hour film called The World of John and Yoko, which really should be called The Bizarre World of John Yoko. Again, good and bad, you know. There is one amazing clip. It's only amazing because it's John Lennon in 1969 watching himself play some other guy.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not amazing in the sense that he does anything or says anything, but it's just quite weird watching. Because again, it's like we always say, it's 7 years ago, but it's 700 years ago. You know,
was it like an ITV special or something?
Yes, ITV. I want to say.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they put this together for the
don't know.
Express purpose of getting some fireworks on film.
Well, yeah, that wouldn't be the first time, would it?
Yeah, right. let's orchestrate a happening. Yeah.
Yes. You're right. They did turn things into events, and that's quite a thing now of documenting your life. I mean, they even had the car that they crashed in Scotland outside of Tittenhurst as almost like an exhibit.
Every time I open up TikTok or Instagram, I'm reminded of John and Yoko. It's funny. You said something. I don't want to misquote you, but you said something about you were talking about the Beatles and showbiz. Like something like John saw the game up front. Paul loved showbiz. George also saw it. And then Ringo just went along for the ride or something to that effect. I don't know if you remember that.
It was something like, I put the Beatles in order of how quickly they tired of fame. And it was George, John, Ringo, Paul.
Right.
How quickly they tired of show business and the whole game. Yeah.
I kind of feel that needs to be amended, that John was pioneering a form of show business that didn't exist until now.
I'll have to think about that one. Yeah.
And he was pioneering this kind of show business where you have a presence on social media where we get to see what you're having for breakfast, and here you are going to the store, and then you have to comment on everything and get it out. Because when you look at what John and Yoko are doing, that's the YouTube influencer, that's the whole situation right there, but it didn't exist then. Our lives, not just as art, because that's how, they're thinking, yes, it's art, but at the same time, it's a kind of show business, like appearing on Mike Douglas and things like that. I mean, it's a form of show business, the Jerry Lewis telethon and stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like so many things in his life, he's just somewhere in the middle. He knows he has to play the game. And he probably had some liking for old-style show business, the same as with old-style songs. Like you said, he turns out to be quite a Bing Crosby fan. I think he just had a bit of both. But I think he just got fed up of smiling. I think it was the smiling, on cue.
Right. Well, it's those contradictions, that's why we keep going back to Lennon. Those contradictions don't really exist in this movie. For the real Lennon, yes, most definitely.
One thing you said earlier about it being a negative portrayal, I think you're right in one sense, but I think for a young John Lennon fan watching this for the first time, they would probably just think he was really cool because, as I said earlier, this crazy thing where he's just got one-liners just on, just ready for every occasion. I just think it's so funny, the idea that someone would be walking around doing that, because I don't think he was tossing off that many one-liners. But no, I think people would probably think, oh, this guy is so cool. He's really powerful presence, and no one can keep up with him. I honestly think that's how a lot of people would view this.
Yeah, I would see him just as like an unpleasant person with no charm, surrounded by a bunch of feckless people who cower in his presence. That's how I see it. So I don't see it as cool per se.
No, but wouldn't a young person, a 21-year-old, try and imagine yourself being 21 seeing this, wouldn't you think John Lennon was quite cool?
It would depend. I mean, maybe this gets into a whole other topic. I was thinking also about why I have a low tolerance for something like this, but a high tolerance for Birth of the Beatles and John and Yoko, A Love Story. And it's because those movies came out when I was a young man, when I was a teenager, right? And I was into the Beatles and into learning about John Lennon. I mean, the period of my life where I was the most into that were my teens and my 20s. And so when I saw Lennon Naked, and when was this movie? It was like
2010.
So I didn't see it until 10 years after it came out. It was during COVID I watched it. The whole Beatles Lennon thing is not part of my everyday life, and it's not anything that defines me anymore. I mean, I say that I'm on a podcast discussing John Lennon, but it's not like, when I was in my teens and 20s, I embraced everything that was coming out. I was loving it. So maybe, to your point, if I were 17 and I was watching this, I might go, oh, this is so great or so cool. God forbid I actually thought this was any reflection on reality, because as soon as I would start reading books or watching documentaries, my opinion would change. I mentioned the Lives of John Lennon. I'm jumping around all over the place.
No, that's okay. Cool.
The Lives of John Lennon, the shorthand version of that is every day of your life, you interact with people, you might have romances or relationships, but you always go to the bathroom every single day, right, in the morning. So if somebody wrote a book about all the times that you went to the bathroom and left out everything else, everything in that book would be true. You did wake up, but it would create the impression that's all you did was crap. and you did nothing else. And that's kind of what this film is like. And that's a bit of like The Lives of John Lennon. That's the critique of it anyway, is that it leaves out a lot of the positive stuff. This movie distills that even more into this. I mean, we disagree on this. I think it's a very one-note characterization of John. There's not a fun-loving John Lennon here. There's zingers here, but they always seem to be at the expense of someone else or to belittle someone. For Lennon's birthday, which just passed, on my Facebook page, I posted some pictures of John running around in a field with Dudley Moore and Norman Rossington for Not Only But Also.
Oh, yeah, 65.
And then I'm thinking, the character in this movie, Lennon Naked, would never be doing that.
Just to nitpick a bit, the Magical Mystery Tour press conference obviously is being a bit playful. No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying there's a couple just for...
I mean, if I were to sum up this movie, I know we're not at the end yet, but
you can sum up if you want, because there's only all the Janoff stuff. I think it's all right, but as you were saying, when he says, what about me, to a lot of people, they've got no sympathy for him, so they don't really care about him. But yeah, you can sum up if you want.
No, I was just going to say, that sequence with his father. And that's the word is the denouement, right, of the movie. And we're supposed to, like in the audience, we're supposed to go, oh my God, it's because his father turned his back on. That's why he's the way he is. Blanche, I understand it now. That's what we're supposed to have, this epiphany. And that, to me, that whole scene is like out of a soap opera. And it's not too far off because it is a TV movie. So, I can't expect more. I just feel that was very clumsily handled. I mean, you could have, if you wanted to make the same point, you could have done it in a more subtle way where you rely on the intelligence of the audience to pick up on what's going on rather than have the character going, what about me? over and over again, hitting you over the head with it.
I just think the actual delivery of that line, I just thought it was a well-delivered line. But yeah, of course, I mean, just saying, it's because of his childhood, yeah, obviously it's too simple. And I think you might have mentioned soap opera. Obviously, John Yoko, Love Story was a TV movie, but we sort of said that had a few soap opera traits.
Oh, yeah.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just purely, it's not really going into any depth in anything. Partly because with John Yoko's life, there's just too much to cover. There's just too much. You have to kind of skirt over it, and they're only covering, apart from the very early scene, they're only covering about 4 years here.
I was just curious, and I went to Rotten Tomatoes, and I said, what score does this movie have? And it was 38%. And I thought, that's where I would put it, somewhere. I feel like it has a couple of good jokes. I think the stuff with Brian at the beginning is interesting, and I may be biased there because maybe it reminded me of Hours in the Times or something. I don't know. But to me, it's a very one-note, unsympathetic John. I feel like Lennon deserved better than this.
I think just the thing I disagree with you, you said this was clearly worse than John Yoko Love Story. I think it
is. Because
at least it's difficult to compare because John Yoko Love Story is about twice the length, isn't it? And
true.
Covers way more. So
I think there's more to the Lennon character in John. Like, I appreciated it more after this because I thought we got some of Lennon's humor, which I think is so huge. In this, he has these little moments, but again, it's always kind of malicious. And I know Lennon had that side to him, but he's not like that. I mean, you watch the Beatles Get Back documentary, and you have all those bits where Lennon is doing that Rolling Stones. He's been asked to do this introduction, and he keeps goofing on it the entire time. That kind of zany humor is so much a big part of his makeup. I mean, it's one of the reasons I became as big a fan as I was, and then also why I gravitated more toward John than anyone else was because of this sort of zany sense of humor, which was not always to take the piss out of someone else. John enjoyed making people laugh too. And this John would never in this movie. This John, even though the Paul character smirks a few times, but I don't think this John would ever have it in him to just want to make someone laugh.
Yeah, there's humor, but it's all brutal. If I had to sum up John in this is brutal John, which is obviously one of the many Johns, but it's a real emphasis on that. It's brutal with Cynthia, and yeah, I think Get Back. Even the day where he is being a bit cutting, it's one of the days when George isn't there. But yeah, he's so funny. He's talking about the theory of masturbation making you go blind. He says, doesn't make you blind, but very short-sighted. And it's so funny because obviously we know that John Lennon's eyesight was just absolutely terrible. I mean, that is brilliant. I love that. And he starts reciting lyrics, doesn't he? Ask me why, I'll say I love you, and I'm always thinking of you. That kind of thing.
When I was much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now my life has changed in so many ways. Wapapaluma, Berlin Bamboo.
So to sum up, okay, we maybe disagree about how bad this is, but I'm not saying it's great by any means. And it's a shame really that we've 2 appearances in a row that you've made on Glass Onion. We've talked about these films which are sort of a bit crap, but I hope our conversation's been interesting. Why are biopics generally not very good? You and I agree about another thing. Bohemian Rhapsody, the Freddie Mercury one, that made $1 billion. Yeah. That was purely a money-making exercise, and I could see through it. It's got all the sort of commercial tropes and everything. I liked Rocket Man, that was all right. The Elvis one, just want to say one thing about it. I watched it, and then when there's footage of the real Elvis at the end, all I'm thinking is, I'd rather watch 2 hours of the real Elvis.
Well, you're going to get your chance now in this movie that's coming out, this sort of follow-up to the Elvis movie.
Yeah, but why do biopics generally not work?
Part of me feels that there's no way to... these people that are... The film is being made of them are charismatic on, another level. And you get an actor giving it his best shot and a movie trying to fabricate why we like them in the first place, and they always come up short. And with Bohemian Rhapsody, for some reason, they felt they needed to fictionalize so much of it that I wasn't even watching a biopic at some point. After 20 minutes, I just thought, well, this is not a biopic at all. This is some kind of feel-good hero's journey with the music of Queen playing. I'm not looking forward to the new one that's coming, the Sam Mendes, the 4 films. I've seen the actors, and I've only seen them in interviews and seen their photos. I don't think any of them resemble really any of the Beatles at all. Maybe they're doing an elaborate I'm not there type of situation. What did you think of the Timothée Chalamet Bob Dylan biopic? Because that was also another fictional. Have you talked about that on your podcast? Or
no, I was going to... Ben Burrell was on the show years ago. I'm toying with the idea of doing a film gold about I'm Not There, because let me tell you, that is an honourable exception. I fucking love that film.
Well, that was a way to do it, right? Because there's no way you can make a biopic about... How do you make a bio... I guess you can't make a biopic without reducing someone down to a cartoon. I guess there's really no way to do it, or it's seldom done well. And I'm Not There was kind of like, look, there's no way. How can we, Dylan is a mass of contradictions. How could we ever do this? How could we ever condense someone's life down to an hour and a half? It's just not going to work. So we're going to take this other route. I think that movie tells you more about Bob Dylan than the Timothée Chalamet picture.
Oh, I think that's absolutely brilliant. That. And to answer your question, I quite like the Timothée Chalamet. It wasn't too bad. it was interesting. I think Dylan is probably more ready than most celebrities to have a negative portrayal and actually sign it off.
Yeah.
I think he knew it was going to be negative, and Joan Baez says, you're kind of an asshole, Bob, to him. But yeah, that was all right. I really felt like Timothée Chalamet was trying pretty hard. I'm a big Edward Norton fan, so I was happy to see him there. What other ones are decent? I mean, I know the Buddy Holly fans not like the Buddy Holly story.
No, that's heavily
I thought Gary
fictionalized,
Gary Busey, just Gary Busey alone, and also, oh my God, Val Kilmer as Jim Morrison. Regardless of what you think of that film, that is amazing.
Yes.
No? And I love that Doors film. Again, I saw it when I was 16, 17.
Well, you know what? That's a perfect
I'm not that
example.
bothered.
That's an example of what you were saying before about a young Beatles fan watching this, because although I would argue that the Jim Morrison character in the Doors movie is more sympathetic than the Lennon character here, but he is a bit of a jerk all throughout that film. But that is the Oliver Stone Doors movie is a heavily romanticized version of not only Jim Morrison, but the Doors, experience. But it does work as a good entry point into getting into the Doors. A lot of people that went and saw that didn't walk away thinking, boy, that Jim Morrison, what a jerk. They went out and bought Doors records. I don't know if that happens with Lennon Naked. I don't know if young Beatles fans saw this and then immediately downloaded Imagine.
I think with the Doors one, I am a big Oliver Stone fan, particularly of that era. I think from about Salvador onwards for the next 10 years, I love most of those, including a film called U-Turn, which nobody's heard of.
Oh, I've seen that. That's a great movie.
We just reviewed Sean Penn and Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah.
I love that. We just reviewed it. It's not out yet, but it'll be out later this month. With that Doors one, I think it really does show the craziness of the late 60s fairly well as well.
Yeah.
The drugs and the mysticism and all that kind of thing. Yeah, we talked about the Sam Mendes. I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but when I saw Midas Man, which wasn't too terrible, when I saw those Beatles, I'm just thinking the whole problem is that you've got so much footage of the real people.
Yeah.
This is the difference. Let's say, take the Buddy Holly one, for example. It wasn't so easy to find out about Buddy Holly. But now there's just so much. The other example I give, which is not music, but the Ali, the Michael Mann film.
Yeah.
Will Smith did a great job. He looked like Ali, had a certain look in his eye. But when they're recreating the fights, just go to YouTube and watch The Rumble in the Jungle, the real one. Watch When We Were Kings, that amazing documentary. So,
well, here's a question for you. I have seen, and I know it's a very controversial topic, but I have seen AI representations of celebrities go from looking weird with extra fingers and face misshapen and everything to now being indistinguishable from actual footage of the person. So could you, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen with the biopic, but could you have an actor play these characters and deepfake the actual person's face on them and with their voice? I saw a couple of things with Lennon being interviewed that weren't real, but they could have passed for it. I mean, they used his voice. I know it's incredibly controversial because it's basically a kind of necromancy, I guess. But what do you think about that?
Well, I think AI is an extension of what was already happening. I joked that, did you and I actually meet in London, or was it some sort of dream I had? Because of this virtual world, you're never quite sure what's real and what isn't. But you do exist, and I exist.
Although I could fake some AI foot. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah. Let's go to Paris.
Right.
Yeah, I see it's an extension of that. I mean, the AI stuff, I am quite terrified in terms of the world about how it's going. Not so much with music and things like that. I just see that as entertainment. I just don't think I don't have any need to see any of the Beatles portrayed by actors ever again.
Well, you know what? There's a kind of
vital enough.
I think there's like a brotherhood. I know that's a cliche, but there is like a brotherhood and charisma that all four have collectively that each of us who gets into the Beatles recognizes that, but I think we all experience it individually. We all experience it just a little bit differently from everyone else. So to portray that on screen is tough. You're going to get actors who really don't know each other all that well to pretend as if they've played together in bands for years and have that camaraderie. And I don't think it ever really comes across. I mean, you hear stories about like the actors on Backbeat all had to room together or something like that, but it still doesn't come across when you watch that film.
Yeah, I think if you take little bits of each of the biopics, you might get the real story. So I thought Birth of the Beatles was great on those early Beatles, but the Liverpool streets and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think Backbeat really captured the excitement. I mean, that scene where they all do the Preludin, I think is brilliant. So I think you could take little bits. And let me just reverse a statement I made about 3 minutes ago, that I never want to see John Lennon represented. If you could get someone like Todd Haynes and someone like whoever wrote I'm Not There, John Lennon is absolutely ripe for that. Take 5 or 6 John Lennons as we had 5 or 6 Bob Dylans. John Stewart, who wrote Dylan, Lennon, Marx and God, agreed with me. I don't know if it was on air or off air, but yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good idea. The problem is Dylan fans are much more accepting of something. I feel like Dylan fans almost expect a movie like I'm Not There. Dylan contains multitudes. Of course, there's no, easy way to do this. Whereas I think Beatles fans tend to be a little more meat and potatoes, and they kind of want, a very traditional movie experience. I don't think there's been an experimental film essay on any of the Beatles that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
I mean, there's stuff like Across the Universe, but that's got nothing to do with anything.
Stop holding back. Come on.
I mean, you want to talk about bad movies?
No, we've run out of time. Sorry.
I couldn't make it through that. I can't even review it because I couldn't even get through it.
No, the next time you're on any of my shows, we're going to talk about something we like. I think it's time. Although we like that thing with Bernard Hill, didn't we? We quite like that.
Yeah.
John Lennon, A Journey in the Life.
I guess that is kind of an... But again, the expectations are so low. It's like 1984, whenever that was, or 85, and shot on video. It's like somebody's video project. And it was interesting. At least it was different.
Yeah, I'd like you to watch Nowhere Boy, because I think you'd quite like that. I think they really capture... And a couple of the Quarrymen actually said they captured Liverpool when they were there.
I'm sure I'll see it at some point. I'll make it a double feature with the Linda McCartney story.
I haven't seen that one, no.
Yeah,
I heard the guys, Beatles Films, reviewing that, yeah.
I mean, the guy who plays Paul played Paul in another film. Was it the guy
was in
from
Backbeat. It was in Backbeat.
So that would be a good double feature, I guess. And who's the guy who plays Paul in Lennon Naked? I've seen him in other stuff.
All I know, he was in a thing called Fleabag.
I've seen him in other stuff. He doesn't have much to do. In this film, Lennon Naked, this is the most passive Paul I've ever seen. We think of Paul as like this control freak, this guy who always has to have everything his way. But in Lennon Naked, nope. He's just kicking back and smirking and going with the flow.
Yeah, well, in Midas Man, again, I'm not saying that height matters that much. But why cast someone who's about 5'6" as John Lennon? I mean, just for historical accuracy. The whole miracle of the Beatles is that John, Paul and George were all about the same height, all wrote songs and all had the same hair that could be fashioned into that style. That was the whole thing about it. When John Lennon, there's some point in Midas Man where he gets angry. I'm just laughing. I'm like, you don't have any of the threat and the menace of John Lennon. But Ian Hart in Backbeat, there's menace and vulnerability, and that's what John Lennon was. If I ever met him, that's probably what my takeaway would be.
So I was on YouTube when I was first looking for Lennon Naked. At one time, it was just up on YouTube and you could watch it. And I couldn't find it. But I kept stumbling across these scenes from other movies. And there was this scene where it was somebody who was supposed to be Brian Epstein. And then the Beatles show up to surprise him, and they're in their Sgt. Pepper regalia. I thought, is this like some crappy TV show where they time travel? Is this like Quantum Leap or that episode of Doctor Who or something? Is that what this is? And then it turned out it was from Midas. It was from Midas Man.
Oh, was it? Right.
Because it was John Lennon sticking his head around the corner, but he was so small. It was some kind of a parody or some pastiche, and I'm like, oh, actually, this is from Midas Man.
Yeah, he was more jokey than the one than Christoper Eccleston's John Lennon. Yeah. So again, there were bits of that weren't too bad. But let me give a counter to what we've been saying about biopics. My niece, Olivia, has never really been a big Elvis fan, but she's a big Baz Luhrmann fan. She loved Great Gatsby, and that's her favourite novel, I think. So she loved the Elvis film. So there is, of course, the argument that, of course, it's for a young audience, you know, and I haven't been in my 20s for a number of years.
I mean, you're correct about the Elvis film because you can see it on YouTube. There's like a vibrant Elvis fan community, which has always existed, but it's now pretty much dominated by young people, young women who are creating podcasts or whatever, and they came into the fold through the Elvis film. So for all of my criticisms of that movie, it was certainly a shot in the arm in terms of Elvis fandom. So maybe that'll happen with this, but I kind of feel like the Beatles don't really need 4 biopics to make that happen, you know? I think people find it's like a rite of passage, and we've talked about this before in high school. If you're going to be a little different from everybody else who's listening to Sabrina Carpenter or whoever's big now, you're going to discover the Beatles and be that weird fringe person, which is funny because the Beatles are the number one group and big commercial product. But in the modern parlance, you would be on the fringe if you were into the Beatles.
Yeah, I have slightly changed my opinion about how big the Beatles are among younger people. Because obviously, you know, you've got that fella Ethan and Hudson, you know, those young guys who started podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hudson was about 13 when he started his. Ethan was about 17. I don't think they're representative, though, of young people. I think young people might see the Beatles as just another one of those 60s bands. I'm not sure they're that massive with young people. I'm not sure.
No. But I'm like on the, they're more of a fringe thing. So if you're the isolated, and this is not, I'm not talking about Hudson or these guys, but you know, if you're out of step with the rest of your class, you know, you might stumble upon the Beatles. You might start collecting vinyl. You might discover Pet Sounds. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that you could really get into that may have been top 40 super popular stuff in their day, but now times have changed so much that it just seems otherworldly, the music of the Beatles or Brian Wilson or what have you. It could be Led Zeppelin, you know, who knows what people get into. I was watching a video the other night where it was a father and son on YouTube, and they were going through the Beatles anthology records, and the son, who looked like he was about 11, was saying, oh, this was done on the rooftop. No, this is done in Savile Row. No, this was recorded. They had moved to Apple Studios by that point. And I thought, this is like me when I was young, trying to get these details.
I mean, he was educating his father.
Yes, his father was asking the questions, and like the 11-year-old was telling him when things were recorded. So it's out there, but yet you're correct. I think people do make that mistake where you notice like 6 kids that are into the Beatles, and you go, well, you know, everybody's into them. But I think they exist like World War II exists. You know, if you're interested in the past, there's a couple of huge events that are out there for you to discover, and the Beatles are one of them.
Yeah, definitely. All right, very good. I feel like the kind of after chat we had, which we have recorded, which is part of the show, was possibly better than our review. But I don't know. Because once we get started, you know, we can go off on these long things. We had that famous 3 or 4 hour episode that was about 1962.
Yep.
About half of it was about us. Anyway, can you just quickly tell us about your podcast, please?
Oh, yes. We Say Yeah, a Cliff Richard and the Shadows fan podcast. We are entering this very interesting, well, not yet, but next year, we're entering an interesting phase, certainly in Cliff Richard's career, where he embraces Christianity. So that gives me an opportunity to talk about my Christianity on the program, which I'm interested in doing, but I'm certainly not going to be preaching. But conversations about spirituality, I'm all for it. Part of the reason of doing that podcast is sure, I enjoy the music, but it also gives me an opportunity to talk about genres of music and the type of thing that I wouldn't normally speak about if I were doing like a Beatles podcast. So when I was going to start doing podcasts, my options, I was going to do a Beatles podcast or maybe something on the Beach Boys. Those would be the two or maybe even Sinatra. But, we just covered the Cinderella pantomime. So I got to talk about the music that was featured in that pantomime from 1966. So I get to talk about stage musicals and musical theater and things like that. So it holds my interest, whereas sometimes if you're just talking about your kind of standard rock music, for me anyway, it gets a little boring. So I can venture off into different topics. And for me to be talking about instrumental music as much as I am on there, I never would have thought in a million years, but obviously if you're covering the Shadows, you have to do it. So I'm much more in tune with, what a guitar is doing and the role of the rhythm guitarist than I would be in other, even covering the Beatles, I'm paying more attention to the song itself and the vocals. But obviously if I'm covering the Shadows, I'm going to be paying much more attention to the arrangement and the instrumentation. So anyway, that's what's happening.
Yeah, having said that, though, I was blown away by some of their vocal numbers. I've been on there twice. The last time I was on there, I really didn't even know they'd done many. I knew they'd done some, but some of their vocal Shadows stuff. But yeah, it's so dominated by Hank Marvin. Yeah. I love the rest of the band, but he's seriously good.
And there's a documentary about Hank coming out, I think, next year, just so you know.
Oh, not a biopic. Yeah.
No, not a biopic.
Oh, damn. We could have reviewed that otherwise. And you've also got a YouTube channel. Is it Ghosty TMRS?
Yes. Ghosty TMRS, and you can go and listen to hundreds of interviews I've done over the past 20 years.
Fab. All right. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for being on.
Thanks.
Once again, Glass Onion's future is just always in doubt. The future's uncertain and the end is always near, as someone once said. But for the listeners, I will be tackling 1975, the year of my birth. So once again, looking at the events and then the John Lennon Beatles stuff. So
what are you going to do when you get to 76 or 77 or those?
I think very, very early on I had Kit O'Toole on. We did an episode, I actually called it 75 to 80, but so I don't have two episodes of 75, I changed that to 76 to 80. I don't remember what we talked about. I think we talked about Between the Lines and the fact that John Lennon was always composing. And I think we talked about the audio diary, the famous 5th of September 1979, that one. So, yeah, I think I've already covered those.
All right.
Anyway, thanks very much, and stay on the line. We'll have a chat after.
Sure.
Thanks for the listeners, of course, for listening. That's what listeners do, generally. Occasionally they view when I do video ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I'll be back soon with John Lennon in 1975. Bye for now.
Hi, everyone.
Take this, brother. May it serve you well.
On the 9th of October 1970, which happened to be John's 30th birthday, Freddie and Pauline paid a visit to John and Yoko at their new home at Tittenhurst, along with their 18-month-old son, David. They arrived by appointment, but very soon, according to Pauline, John grew angry with his father, blaming him for certain things, and the meeting finished abruptly. John's relationship with his father did finally end happily. Just before Alfred died, on the 1st of April 1976, John rang him from New York. They had a long, affectionate conversation, and John sent a large bouquet of flowers to him in hospital. Letter 108. Postcard to Freddie and Pauline Lennon, the 26th of April, 1969.
Hello, you two. Love from John and Yoko.